Hey everyone, welcome to this webinar where we are going to talk about the State of Dapr report of this year. I'm Mark Duiker, developer advocate at Digrid, and with me is Mark Vossel. Hi Mark.
Hi Mark, it's fantastic to be here. It's convenient, we're both called Mark, so it's easy to remember our names. Yes, and I'm Mark Fussell, I'm the CEO of Digrid, originally one of the co-creators of Dapr, and been along this journey for a long time. So we're super excited to run through about this report that we've been generating and working with the community for the last few months.
Exactly, yeah. And this is the second edition of the report, right? Because the last one was about, I think, 1.5 years ago. So some of the information we can actually refer back to like the previous edition and see what the differences are. So I think that's quite interesting.
Exactly. The first one we did was right at the end of 23, that time frame. And then we started this one about the same time frame in end of 24. And we thought because of the timing when it came out, we'd call it the 25 report. So yes, it's kind of about 1.5 years apart between the two.
All right. Let's mention how people can actually use this platform, because maybe they're not familiar with it. So you should see an interface that says like interactions, because we have a couple of polls and also some other things coming up. So if you want to participate in a poll, that will be great. So they'll be shown there. There's also a Q&A option for you to ask some questions, and you can also use the chat. Exactly, someone already found it. Hey, that is Fraser. Hi, Fraser. So if you want to just mention something, and there'll also be some open-ended questions that you are going to ask as well, you can use this chat functionality.
All right, with that, Mark, we got a lot to cover, so let's dive in and go through this.
Yes, okay. So this is basically the agenda is basically just the State of Dapr report on all of the sections there. So we're going to cover how Dapr is used, how people are developing with Dapr, which languages, which frameworks, popular building blocks, the flexible infrastructure services, the components, how Dapr actually delivers a return on investment, what people like about Dapr, what they think are improvement points, something about the ecosystem and the community, and quite some slides information about the future plans and improvements.
Yeah, so let's kind of dive in then and talk about, the demographics. As you'd expect, we interviewed really lots of engineers, lots of architects, and you can see here the spread of people. Like, the vast majority of people were hands-on developers, people writing code, architecting solutions, and they were both spread across individual contributors and kind of team members in this across all sorts of different company sizes. So broad range of developers from different disciplines, different side of companies. In total, I think we got around well over 220 people who replied to the survey. Isn't that correct, Mark?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, just over 200, and I think which is like an increase, like significant increase over the report last year. So yeah, if you can have like a significant increase every year, also the report becomes also like more reliable because you have like a larger sample size. But yeah, 200 is I think a great number to have to report. Definitely.
Yeah. So let's dive in then and start off with a poll. And we would
Yes.
love you to rate your familiarity with Dapr in terms of how familiar you are with using it, and we'll pop the poll up now.
Yeah. So the options are: I'm running Dapr in production. That's amazing. A lot of people are doing that. Not running in production, but very familiar. The other option is I've heard of Dapr before, but could learn more. And the final option is this is one of the first times I've heard of Dapr. And we would be a bit surprised if that's the option, right? Because why would you join the State of Dapr reports? But it's possible.
It is possible, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we can see that it's a bit of 50-50 between not running Dapr in production, but very familiar with Dapr, and I've heard of Dapr before, but could learn more. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So you're right. So there's about 50-50. So, it looks like most of you are on your journey, really, where you're starting in the beginning of a journey, or you're starting building POCs and prototypes. And that's what we see pretty familiar actually with. There's actually, thousands of companies that use Dapr today. We track large numbers of them, and we're very familiar. And we get a lot of feedback from. You could read about sort of CNCF reports and case studies we have, but it's great to see that you're on your journey and getting to learn Dapr. And this is what this is about. Why is it you get the benefits around Dapr? And we'll dive into more details around how it helps you on that journey.
Right. Okay, so this is really about how many people are actually using Dapr and sort of the impact that it has, right? So apparently 72% of development teams are using Dapr for mission critical applications, which is quite an important and also a high number, to be honest.
Yeah, I think this is kind of crucial story around all of this is that, one thing that's come out in the last at least year or 2 years or so is like, Dapr now is, and I think, one of the things that really made it stand out, that solidified this, is that last year Dapr became a graduated project inside CNCF. CNCF basically does its vetting and fully endorses that. As part of that, they dive in and do a lot of user surveys of people running in production. And I think, the graduation of Dapr inside CNCF, coupled with, the feedback here we had, is that, there are many teams and companies who've taken Dapr into production and run it in mission critical scenarios. And here we're talking about financial customers using it for transaction systems, healthcare companies using it in their healthcare portals, and where we see a huge variety of different types of industries. And so it's pretty exciting to see all of that.
Great, yeah. And compared to last year, we also see that a lot of more teams are running Dapr in production, right? So we go from 37% to 49%. Yeah? So people are moving from their initial proof of concept stage to production, which is, of course, great to see. Yeah. All right, this slide highlights a bit which clouds people are using, but sometimes people are using like multiple clouds and also hybrid clouds and even also edge compute. So what can you say about this, Mark?
Yeah, but I think the super interesting thing here is that, the clouds, the use of the clouds is where people deploy a lot of their production applications to. And we see, Azure there has sort of dominated, but there's been a huge growth now over the last year of deployments into that AWS. You see there's some growth there inside GCP, but also, there's the on-premises growth as well, where people can take Dapr, deploy it inside their own environments, deployed it, whether it's on a sort of local machines that they have or some, their own sort of data center that they've deployed to. And I think that's kind of the crucial thing here across the multi-cloud. I mean, we see most organizations today deploy to at least 2 clouds or 2 environments that might be on-premise or the cloud. And I think that this is something that, reflects pretty much in this survey now, that there's a choice of probably the 2 primary clouds. And I think this we'll see as we move on is one of the key benefits of Dapr, the ability to have move between and deploy and have the portability across different clouds. In fact, there was a great article, wasn't there, recently about deploying on premises.
I think I have
just
here.
Bring that up and let's kind of show that here.
Yes, by Johan Lauwers, fellow Dutchman. Hi, Johan. How to run Dapr on the edge without internet. So definitely like an air-gapped situation. So it's not only on public clouds that you can run Dapr, but also on the edge or air-gapped environments, which is really impressive. So yeah, definitely have a look at this article. Yeah.
Exactly. And if you dive into this, he kind of shows, all the benefits of basically building a distributed application locally and showing how it was basically pulling devices, information from a lot of IoT devices. And I think that this kind of is a great example of how, the edge world of Dapr gets used, and then you get the portability and the reuse into different clouds itself. So I think that was a great kind of review of showing how, the multi-cloud approach is kind of dominating now within inside most organizations.
Yep. Yeah, agreed. All right. Okay, let's move on. Developing with Dapr. So this is what kind of languages the developers are using.
Yes, and this is super interesting because what we've seen here is that, the Python and the use of Java has sort of grown pretty significantly over the last year. I mean, the beauty that we see with Dapr is it's a multi-language polyglot environment. In fact, what it doesn't quite capture so much in this survey is that we actually see that most companies now and teams have usually more than one language. It's pretty common now, with the rise of more AI usage inside apps, that Python has grown quite a bit as an additional language that gets built inside there. So we're pretty sure that the increased use of Python here, as you see a jump of like 11% compared to the previous survey we did, is driven by the use of sort of more AI and applications and bringing that in for certain. But you see also that, Java's had a big jump as well in its usage. And I think this also reflects not only the polyglot nature of Dapr as well, but sort of the different diversity of teams within inside it all.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
So,
yeah, and we've also written quite a bit about this, right? Because for people usually use the kind of development framework, right, to quickly build like microservices. So when you're using Java, then people typically use something like Spring Boot. So one of our colleagues, Mauricio Salatino, wrote quite some articles about how Dapr and Spring Boot work very nicely together.
yeah,
So
I think it's really important to talk about frameworks and Dapr here, actually.
yeah,
Dapr has a client itself, but, we've worked pretty hard inside the project to integrate that with various frameworks as well that it uses. Today, ASP.NET Core and the .NET side is very well integrated with C#. And over the last year, we've worked really hard with the Spring Boot community to integrate Dapr into Spring Boot. And I think that you'll see much more of this coming out from the project itself in the coming months. It's there right now, but the Spring Boot integration is something that has made certainly a dramatic effect and a leap in terms of the usage of Java inside there. And I think the same can be said inside the Python frameworks. I mean, Flask and Django are sort of the dominant frameworks inside there, and they integrate really nicely with the Python SDK. And then I would say also on sort of the JavaScript side, you've got Next.js and Express.
yeah.
I mean, and there's sort of natural usage of Dapr inside those as well. So I think that framework integration also drives a lot of this story with the Dapr usage, and it's not just a pure client usage.
Definitely. Yeah. And if people want to try it out, right, I always recommend people to go to the Dapr quick starts because the quick starts contain a lot of code samples, but also those code samples also incorporate some of these web service application frameworks as well. So that's really great to see. Related to this, so .NET is indeed very, very strong when it comes to like SDK usage. We also see like a very popular way to create or write microservices is .NET Aspire. It's really got a lot of traction, I think, over the last year. But yeah, .NET Aspire is really about local development, and it's really good at that. But sometimes people think, okay, do I now need to use .NET Aspire and not use Dapr? But that's definitely not the case. So .NET Aspire is really about local development, and Dapr is definitely about running stuff in production at scale. So you get the best bang for the buck by using both .NET Aspire for local development and using Dapr because you can use all of the components and the nice scaling on Kubernetes.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point here is that .NET Aspire and Dapr are a great complement to each other, and certainly we hear, and we'll see this later on in the survey, that Dapr has a great local developer experience. You can augment that even better if you want for the local development using .NET Aspire. But as you say, Mark, when you take things to production, you got to put that into your Azure deployment. You got to put that into your AWS deployment, GCP. That's where Dapr shines well around these sort of things. I'd also give a shout out at this point. There's a little shout out for the .NET developers. There's also a thing called Dapr Sidekick as well.
Yes.
And that is also another sort of a great way of just doing local debug development where it effectively spins up and launches a process around here. And then there's also, we'll get to this later as well, there's also multi-app run, but there's a few other ways inside here.
Yeah, actually, yeah. Well, it's good that you mentioned it because the .NET Aspire really only works if you're on .NET 9. But if you're not on .NET 9 yet, then something like Dapr Sidekick is the solution for you. Yeah, good point.
Yes. Okay.
Let's move on to the popular building blocks.
Yeah, well, I mean, here, as you can see, I mean, the established ones that have been out there since Dapr 1.0 shipped all those years ago, 6+ years ago when we first shipped Dapr, pub sub and service invocation and state managements and even the secrets APIs are the ones that dominate around all this. I think we see a lot of people start with pub sub because you're building these event-driven distributed applications. Naturally they need to be decoupled, and that's where you do your messaging between them. And then for the direct service-to-service calls, the request-reply style, you can put the service invocation in there. But I think the interesting thing here, Mark, is the growth of workflow and jobs.
Yeah, definitely. Especially now workflow is a stable API in 1.15. I mean, it was already very popular before it got to be like a stable API. A lot of people were already using it, but now it is stable. I think it's going to take off quite a bit in it. Yeah. So I'm very curious when we do the next State of Dapr reports because I wouldn't be surprised if it becomes like a top 5 or top 4 API.
Yeah, I think the workflow one is crucial because what you have is you got to do orchestration of multiple calls and of your across your services in terms of a distributed architecture. And so workflow gives you this long running durable execution. And I think the key that what Dapr brings is that you can combine workflow with PubSub, with service verification, with state management. And so you're not scrambling with, well, I got my workflow engine, and then, how do I bring in my publish and subscribe and do my event-driven architecture around this all? But you can combine those two. And I think that is sort of the exciting thing around all this, and why we're seeing a lot of interest inside workflow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think a lot of people who are not using Dapr yet, Anita, are probably tempted to try it out now because of workflow. And people who are already using Dapr, I think that they'll probably will use it a lot because it's very easy to integrate it with all of the other APIs. So it makes sense. Yeah.
And then the jobs API here, I mean, the fact there's been such a jump here of 22%, I mean, that shows how, and it's only been out in 2 releases. I mean, think of it as a cron job. There you are, you want to kind of fire off an event, get it to do, some kind of processing for you in some time frame, and there you can kick off that cron job type thing. So it makes total sense.
Yeah, it's used in, it's also often quite sort of simple aspects which are implemented well, like scalable indeed in this case, which makes it really, really powerful. So it's good to see this API, definitely. I think we want to highlight one video here. So during one of the most recent community calls, I did a run through of the Python quick start that covers the workflow in quite some detail. So people might want to look at this. I also going to post it in here.
Yeah, posting that's one you did. Was it back at the beginning of this month, actually, 5th of March?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's quite recent. Yeah.
So when 1.15 came out, in fact, one of the things we didn't capture inside here, which also has come out in 1.15, is the conversation API. I guess we'll get to that in a bit.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's also in the same webinar.
So we'll see that in the next report. But in that same video you covered inside there. So check out that and kind of give you a little bit of overview about workflow.
Yep. All right. I think it's time for another poll. So what are your favorite Dapr APIs? I mean, I can definitely tell what's mine. Mine is definitely workflow.
Yours is workflow. Yeah, I think workflow. I mean, what's so? I mean, the key thing about workflow is that you can combine and that solves such a hard problem. You see so many people write code where you're trying to orchestrate a business process, and it's a classic state machine. There you are. You got a forward-only state machine. You're going through a set of activities. You can do parallel. You can do fan in, fan out, sequential. You can do the monitor pattern, and that coordination is crucial. And then you combine that with the messaging side that Dapr brings, and then of course the state management, and you kind of put them all together. So I think that's the side of those things. I also think that for me, one of the most exciting ones is the Actor API, which is what workflow actually builds upon. And I think that we're seeing an increasing use of that because it's the actors represent this codification of state and compute together. Heck, I don't even call it an agent nowadays, but we'll get to that one.
I think in general, I think that's very nice to see how Dapr is evolving, right? Because the Actor API is also using the state, of course, internally, the Dapr state management, and then the workflow is built on top of Actor. So you see these compositions of different APIs into other abstract things that people can use very nicely to build their microservices. So that's really cool to see.
Okay, results are in. And what's topped it?
PubSub, definitely winning. 89%. And then there's a tie between service verification and workflow, both 44%. So so workflow is definitely gaining quickly between the attendees here. That's nice to see.
Yep. And there's a bit of bindings inside there as well, and actors and secrets and configuration, what you'd all expect. No one voted for state management. Interesting. We should understand why on that one, because that was top of our survey. So
interesting. We'll get back to that. Maybe people have some specific needs for state management. All right. Let's move over to the component model and what kind of underlying infrastructure people are using. Any insights here, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing here as we look through all of these is that you see I mean, interesting across the state management and workflow and Actor, you see Redis dominate as a state store. In some ways, I think that's a little bit driven by the ease of use of Redis and also the fact that it's part of the sort of local Dapr development experience.
Yeah.
But then sort of close behind that, you see pretty common databases like PostgreSQL, and then those driven by sort of the major clouds. And so I don't think there's kind of anything that's sort of really surprising here in terms of your, using cloud or using some of those kind of pretty well-known databases. I think one thing to draw out here is that there's quite a diverse set of message brokers that we have inside Dapr. There's pretty much like 25 of them. There's quite a, and I think here you see popping now into the top 8 here in the list is Solace, NATS, and MQTT, which kind of reflect this sort of diversity of the environment, and also I think reflects sort of that Dapr is kind of does break out, to not just be necessarily run on some of the public cloud environments and things. So I think that's interesting.
Yeah. No, I agree.
I'd also point that on the observability side, you see here that there's a huge range of sort of diversity of tools for observability. Most of this is just the ease of use of a Dapr sends out open telemetry events, and then you can sort of hook that in. So
yeah, I think it's definitely very clear that because of Dapr, people can use like many different infrastructure components across many different providers. That's really obvious from this chart.
Yeah.
All right. So then Dapr delivers a significant return on investment. Well, this percentage definitely says that. So 96% say that Dapr saves development time. And then more than half, like 59%, say it saves even 30% or more development time, which is really quite a significant chunk of time if you can save that from building microservices. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is kind of one of the key slides that kind of always comes out in our survey, and it's about developer productivity, building stuff. Don't reinvent the pattern. Don't reinvent what you're doing. You want to focus on business logic. Can Dapr provide you with the APIs and the platform to build that on? And the answer is an overwhelming yes. It saves me a huge amount of time going forward. And the vast majority of developers say that, and they see the benefits of that. So fantastic to hear. It's what we'd expect, but this quantifies it in an actual numerical way.
Yeah, great to see. Yeah.
I think this then moves on to what does it do? What are the benefits? And I think, as you'd expect, you're not writing platform code. The greatest competitor Dapr has is, people reinventing the wheel, reinventing the pattern, building the platform yourself. And I think that, once you discover Dapr, you realize that, maintaining and writing your own code, for example, doing your own pub sub API and having, the concept around the portability of that is a tough problem to handle, and, needs a lot of investment. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's also ties into the whole platform engineering aspect, right? That also gets very a lot of attention lately. I can also show one of the charts that we now have on Dapr.io. That Dapr is solving a lot of platform engineering challenges, right? Since we're here in this platform interface layer that a lot of application or developers can use, and then easily connect across like different components. What we've already seen that people are using different state stores, different pub-sub message brokers, and it all like integrates very nicely with all of the other cloud native tools, and then on all of the different cloud providers.
Yeah, this is something actually that we've seen tremendously change in the last year. In fact, since we last did our survey, and that is, Dapr traditionally and even now focused a lot on application developers building particular applications on, say, a particular cloud they chose. Now we're seeing a lot more of the conversation being driven also by the platform engineering teams. And if you go back to the previous slide on there, if you go to this deck, I mean, first this shows a great picture of how Dapr fits in with platform engineering. But actually, maybe you could stay on this one here. That platform interfaces is key. What is the contract, the interface between the platform engineering team and the application team? And Dapr plays a beautiful role in this. If you think about it all, the fact that you can choose a pub sub API, and we see this a lot of the time. There was a great talk done by last App Developer Con held at KubeCon, which we should post a link for, done by FICO. And they talked about their journey of how they wanted to move from Apache Kafka to Pulsar, and the fact that they could have a single API around all that to help with that migration between the two, and yet support two different message brokers at the same time, and use the PubSub API over that to provide that abstraction to their team is a good example of that. And so, as platform engineering discovers this, I think that the role that Dapr plays in that interface contract is super important. In fact, we're going to be publishing a paper in the next week or so, hopefully around before KubeCon, which talks and dives into, and we did a deeper survey and a deeper analysis of Dapr in sort of the platform engineering space, and really kind of articulated well the challenges it solves. And I think that is something that, when we kicked off this survey, we didn't quite have that picture. And now since then, it's sort of come out much, much more strongly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we were like quite focused on more of the developer journey, but not so much on the platform engineering journey. But yeah, both are very valid aspects, although quite different. So it's nice to see this white paper come out. Yeah, great. All right. Oh yeah. All right. Let's move on to the Dapr likes and improvements. So first, the what people like about Dapr.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of reflects in some ways, a little bit on the previous slide, and that is, when you build, I mean, given that Kubernetes pretty much is the de facto distributed system hosting runtime now to run your code, as in, it provisions and deploys a set of processes, containers, and a bunch of things, and orchestrates those all around. And that businesses are requiring you to kind of build distributed applications because of the agility and speed around all those, then Dapr fits in perfectly for reducing, building microservices, distributed architectures around that, and that kind of comes out strongly. I would also say, going back to the platform independence, and we'll talk about this, swapping those components, the fact that you can build it locally and move to the cloud, which is that fourth one, local developer experience. The fact that there's multi-cloud independence, that you can, again, not have to break the contract with your developers. The platform team can move between, different message brokers and different clouds. And I think down here as well, like secure, simple, and reliable, I think that's critical. I mean, it takes a lot of time for you to kind of produce a reliable runtime that has end-to-end security built into it all.
Yeah.
And then sort of a reliability where you do retries, the concept of timeouts, circuit breakers, retry mechanisms, and then sort of end-to-end security. So
yeah, exactly. Especially for those organizations who are like polyglot and have like different teams with different languages. If you then want to implement all these retry policies in a sort of similar manner, and then don't use Dapr, then it's quite a challenge to do that for all these different languages. But yeah, because of the sidecar principle, the Dapr takes care of you regardless of language. So that's quite powerful. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. So it's kind of good to see that, that's, when you're told build upon a distributed systems platform like Kubernetes, where do you start? Yeah, then Dapr takes you down that journey.
Cool. All right. Oh, yeah, so I extracted one of the quotes that someone provided for the State of Dapr report. So I love the community of Dapr. I personally found Dapr lend its hand greatly to an evolutionary microservice architecture, with infra being so easy to swap out. Having a single service area for communication through the Dapr client, I felt helped reduce the complexity within the application. So yeah, it's very, cool. Very positive. Love to hear this. All right. Okay, and then about what kind of improvements would people like to see?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that we hear generally, and this kind of, I think this just applies as a whole to distributed application architectures. I mean, there's always this boundary of like how much is distributed and how you do your domain-specific boundaries around your application itself. But that just always leads into the fact that you have to have good telemetry around that. And telemetry goes into a telemetry store, and you can sort of see both, what was happening in terms of the observability of your application itself, and then the underlying host is running around these things. And so I think, the debugging and the troubleshooting is always going to be kind of the hardest thing, particularly sort of in production scenarios. And that's where, the open telemetry support that Dapr has and sending that telemetry information. And I think the metrics side it has, is key to this. But, Dapr itself is a runtime. You've got to combine that with those tools in order to get the best benefits around that. And that's why I still think people have challenges around this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's also mix and match, right? I mean, Dapr, because of the open telemetry, it can be nicely combined with other tools. But yeah, it does mean that you also need to learn about those other tools. You need to make a selection. So yeah, that's also kind of a learning curve that people need to go through, probably.
Yeah, and the documentation always takes a hit here, I feel. I think there's different types of documentation. We probably should dive a little bit more into, what the needs are. I think Dapr documentation covers a lot of, it covers broad set of the APIs and what you can do and how you use it. I always think that people are still looking for more best practices around some of these things. And that's where I think, we continue to have to kind of rely on the community to kind of do best practice blog posts around all this and sort of keep that going. And integrating with other systems around this. And so, that's what kind of one of my call to actions would be is like, if you've got some best practices around this, please either reach out to us. We can take you on a community call.
Yeah.
We love having you on a community calls.
Yep.
Or, help post as a blog post about this. We'll always amplify around this.
Yeah.
Anything you'd say about the developer experience here?
Yeah, definitely. There's so some pointers here. Well, like we mentioned before, .NET Aspire is really popular, and that's for a reason, because it makes the local development experience like really good. So definitely combine .NET Aspire with Dapr. There's definitely quite some people writing about that, which is great. And we're also working on a Dapr University track about .NET Aspire and Dapr. So that will be available in maybe a month or so. Related to that, have more about running locally. A Dapr multi-app run is maybe a feature some Dapr developers are still unfamiliar with. It does allow you to, by providing all of the configuration in a YAML file, you can run or spin up a lot of applications in one go, so you don't have to do a lot of commands to spin up different services into different terminals. So this makes it a bit easier, and is also language agnostic, which is nice. But I think not a lot of people know about this feature just yet. And finally, when it comes to like troubleshooting and more like production environments or things when you're running on Kubernetes, Dapr Conductor is a very useful tool to be using. And we'll do a quick run through in a minute about Conductor.
Yeah, I think that's I think all of those are great ideas around these things. And there's also other development environments as well, like IntelliJ and JetBrains as well. We see people integrate with that. So I think that more documentation and use around that is something that we sort of could spend some more time on.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. The tricky thing about local debugging is, of course, it depends, of course, which language you're using, which IDE you're using. So there are a lot of variables we have to take into consideration. So it definitely requires some community help or vendor help of the different IDEs, for instance. Yeah. All right. So one thing you need was it's difficult to get started with Dapr because it can be still quite a learning curve. So one of the new initiatives that we've done via Dapr is create Dapr University. So let me quickly break out and show that. So this is the Dapr University page on dapr.io. So at the moment there's this Dapr 101 track. So within half an hour we're familiarized with Dapr and 3 of the most popular APIs. But the next track that we'll be releasing in a couple of weeks is about Dapr Workflow, again because it's now stable and a very popular API. The first languages that we're planning to bring out is .NET and Python, but we're also going to deliver content for Java and JavaScript and Go. If you're interested in Dapr Workflow, definitely keep an eye on Dapr University.
Yeah. This is a great way of just kind of going through interactively learning against the APIs, and we're going to have a continuous source of these. And we'll hopefully have some exciting news in the future about how we're also working with the CNCF as well in terms of helping with courses there as well. Yes.
Yeah, and certifications, exactly. Yeah. So there will also be like a Dapr certification as well. Working on that, definitely. All right. Then something about the ecosystem, about the community.
Yeah, we have a strong, big, healthy community. I strongly encourage you that if you want to engage with Dapr and the community and ask questions, Discord's the place. And this is our Discord server. You jump on there. We have lots of different channels and different forums, depending on the repo, depending on the API, depending on just general channel. That's the place to go to. And behind all of that, we have our every twice a month we do our YouTube calls. Yes, on the community.
We live stream. Yep,
we live stream, dive into topics there. But I think probably the biggest thing from the survey itself is that you'll see kind of the switch here between, I think it's probably well known in the industry now that Stack Overflow is having a hard time, and all of the generative AI, Gen AI tools in terms of that are kind of growing. I mean, when we kicked off this survey, we didn't dive too deep into how you are using them all, but I mean, just the rise of ChatGPT, Claude, all those other ones in terms of as tools are clearly the developer's best friend, and by far the best way to kind of get answers around this. So that's kind of the biggest change we see in terms of tooling usage.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's move on. So then the final section, which is a bit longer, is about future plans and improvements. And this is a diagram, I think, about what people are planned to use, right? Or what they would like to use in the near future.
Yeah, I think this sort of reflects a little bit about the survey we just did in terms of, workflow. Now it's become stable in the latest release that came out in 1.15 is kind of by far kind of, the biggest driver for future usage, and, the jobs API as well is kind of proving pretty popular in terms of that. I think the interesting one here to me as well is actors. And if you're not familiar with actors, they represent code and state combined into a long-running durable object, as it were. Think of it as, if you look at the classic object-oriented languages, this is a class-like object, but it has durability, long-running state, and has identity as well. So, and they pair perfectly in those sort of things that where you want like an IoT device to represent something, or a gaming session state. And as we'll get to, and when you build distributed apps and you have a representation, it could also be a transaction, it can be a person, and things like this. So it's interesting to see that is on there, kind of, third in that list, and it kind of lines up very well with sort of use of workflows, because workflows built on those actor API. But yeah, I mean, certainly what we'd expect to see. I'd be interested to kind of know what about sort of the configuration, the cryptography around that and configuration. Perhaps we should sort of do a deep dive into the community and ask them a poll around that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because the cryptography is still like an alpha API as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, indeed. Yeah. All right. The next one in future plans and improvements is what kind of new APIs that you want to see that Dapr could potentially offer.
Yeah, and we pulled this out from proposals repo that we have. In fact, I think you have a link here at the bottom here.
Yeah,
and what this does is that, in order to engage with sort of future features and development and proposals you'd like to see inside the Dapr project, we have this proposals repo. And so, when we kicked off this survey, we sort of took the sort of top proposals around them. You'll see here, the two most in-demand ones are sort of a document store API, how I can do. Today, the state management API really means key value storage. And I just pull that out. Would it be nice to have other forms of storage inside there? A document store type, as in a NoSQL sort of semi-structured document that I can, or an unstructured document even I can pull out, and then sort of just a blob store of data around these. And I think they would pair perfectly along with the combination of, the key value state store, along with, of course, just a general purpose SQL one. But, Dapr, the project, is never going to try to be kind of that super general purpose SQL query, kind of a database API, because that's been tried too many times before. But I mean, we do need sort of a general purpose SQL type approach, I think, inside there, which helps bring together. Databases is still very key to every application development.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you can definitely use like Dapr bindings right now, right, to interact with SQL stores. So
Yeah,
it's definitely an
exactly.
option already. So if you think, okay, I'm not seeing anything SQL wise in Dapr because you may be looking at the key value pair, the state mentioned API, correct. But yeah, when you look at Dapr bindings, then you can actually indeed do like SQL queries, inserts.
Exactly.
So it is possible, but maybe via a slightly different way compared to the state management API. Yeah.
Yep. And you see also as well that we actually put inside this survey at the time, an API for, talking to LLMs. We called it the conversation API. And it actually surfaced, in the time since we kicked off the survey, actually got
Yeah.
implemented and got released in 1.15. And
Yes.
going back to that video you showed earlier, go and try it out. It hooks up to, many different underlying different LLM providers like AWS Bedrock, Claude, to OpenAI,
Yeah,
and
exactly. Yeah,
Anthropic, I should say.
yeah.
And you can take advantage of that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Watch the community call recording where I used the Python SDK to interact with the conversation API, and I was also switching to different providers there, different LLM providers. So definitely have a look. Yeah, and in general, if you have like a Dapr feature request, no matter how big or small, the Dapr/proposals repo is the place to put that feature request in, so people can comment on that. They can vote for it. So that's the best place to put in new ideas.
Exactly. I mean, Dapr is driven by community asks and needs, and that's the place to do your upvoting and kind of see sort of what's kind of coming down on the roadmap. We'll get to a roadmap thing in a little bit, won't we? Yes, about what else is coming.
Yes, yeah, we'll have a bit of a 116 soon. Yes, right. Yeah, let's talk about this very new thing, Mark.
Well, I mean, this is another exciting development that happened inside the Dapr project that came from the community, and that is, if you look at AI agentic systems and all the excitement around them all, and you look about, how they're being portrayed and talked about, and under all of that noise and discussion, basically they're distributed applications, and I say they're distributed applications with a bunch of smarts. And those bunch of smarts being, they hook into and you take advantage of, LLM models in order to be more dynamic in nature.
Yeah.
And, the key thing around those agentic systems is that they have to have the concept of a long running durable workflow in order to do that coordination. And whether you have like just a single simple agent that just fires up, does a single task, and then goes off and, completes that task, or you have a more complex one, which is an agent that kind of does a series of steps, or you have the even more complex, which is one agent talking to another agent, and they're all sort of coordinating these things. Effectively the APIs of Dapr surface perfectly to kind of build an agentic system. So working with the community, in particular a person called Roberto Rodriguez, he contributed and we brought into the Dapr project. And you'll see this as the announcement that we did through CNCF, Dapr agents. And I think this is incredibly exciting because it builds upon the workflow APIs, it builds on the LLM API. Under that, all of that, of course, it builds on the messaging and pub/sub communication APIs, all of inside Dapr. So you can build agentic applications. And the way I like to think about this all is, Dapr is a series of layers. You put together service invocation and state to build actors. We put actors together to make workflows and that coordination. And then agents is a sort of a specialization of the Dapr workflows to build agent types. And in particular, they know how to do messaging between each other, but they also know how to, for example, use tooling and call on to particular LLMs through the conversation API. And you can actually sort of tailor these agents with a set of knowledge inside them all. And so you can say, hey, this agent, here's a set of tools that you can use. So for example, you could create an agent that does a PR code review, and it would have a tool that goes off and so knows how to get a PR, and a tool that goes off how to review a PR, and it sort of choose to then pull those in and sort of do a PR code review and give you sort of suggestions around that as an example of this.
Yeah. And just to be clear, so at the moment, this is a Python library, right? So this is not a Dapr API compared to the other things that they're having, but this is like a Python library for now that people can use that's built on top of Dapr. But there are efforts going on also to incorporate other languages as well, right? To also port it to for instance, .NET and other languages that Dapr supports.
Exactly. I mean, Python being sort of the language of choice initially for a lot of these AI applications, it's been built into the Python SDK. We love you to try that out, give suggestions around it all as it sort of matures over the coming weeks. We're also going to start to do ports of that over into the other SDKs inside all that, and probably the C# and the Java ones, and Go around all this. We just want to make sure we get a bit of feedback on the Python one first around all this. Try it out. This I think is a whole time exciting talk in itself. In fact, we should probably also reference that the community call that you just did 2 weeks ago, or was it last week?
Yeah, the most recent community call was about Dapr agents. Indeed, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So maybe take that link, drop it in there as well. Go and listen to Jeroen Schneider and Roberto Rodriguez talk about Dapr agents, kind of a little bit of background per tool, whole bunch of demos inside all that. Yeah, I think this is really exciting space. And it fits in so perfectly with what the Dapr project's goals were and how it's kind of enabling those distributed application designs.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Zoe, for pasting the link for the community goal. Perfect. Right. I think it's time for another poll then. So what would you like to see from Dapr in the future?
Ooh, I mean, yes. I mean, there's a lot.
It's not a poll, but maybe people can put it in the chat what they would like to see in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm looking at sort of the Q&A here right now. We have a couple of questions inside here. One is there any support for Rust coming? And the answer is actually we do have a Rust SDK now that's been sitting there in sort of alpha beta for a while, maybe a good 6 months. It was being working on by a contributor. He actually is a guy who also helps sort of run our project, helps run sort of the Dapr weekly releases. But so we do have a Rust SDK that's been in development. Like with all these things, if you have some experience around that, please jump in. We would love to have a fully V1 Rust SDK, but as the thing that we always look for in the project is to make sure there's a sufficient number of approvers and maintainers to kind of keep that thing going around these things. So there's the one thing. There's also another question here about will Dapr work with IPv6? And off the top of my head, I thought it did, but I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Yeah. If you're on the Dapr Discord, that's a good place to ask there, to be honest. Yeah. Okay. I think we can also talk about 116 actually.
Yeah, I mean, so maybe this is a better way of talking about it all. It's like every 4 months or so we have a Dapr release. We just did the 115 that came out back in released in February, and since then we've sort of been gathering community input and user input of everyone about what we would like to target inside 116. You can go see the issue here inside here. It's kind of in its final formulating stages around these things. But in particular, there's always been a strong desire to do pub-sub between axes. Actually, you can do messaging between them all. We're looking towards also making sort of streaming subscriptions to become a stable API. I think we're working towards getting the jobs API out of alpha and get to its next level around these things. There's quite a few asks around workflow in terms of features inside there still. And in particular, one thing that we're looking towards is how we can do a set of streaming events from the Dapr runtime. So you can see and play through those events. And then from those events that happen, allows you to build visualization tools around those events. So in other words, I'd like to be able to see the steps that I went through inside workflow as a series of activity events. If I do that as an event stream of those events that happened, I can then build tooling on top of all this. And I think that that goes back to the story we had earlier of like, how do I improve my visualization, debuggability around all these things? So those are sort of some of the key things that are coming in 116.
Yeah. Good point.
But feel free to jump in on this issue, put your comments, kind of, that's kind of what we'd like to hear about.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Again, future plans and improvements, but then more related to what you would like to see when it comes to like running Dapr in production.
Yeah, I mean, I think here, well, actually, this goes back to the sort of visualization side of things in particular. Looking at the metrics, Dapr has 150, 160 different types of metrics that come out across all the different APIs, showing you latency and error rate and throughput. And I think here as well, it also captures interestingly about how you do the application visualization and even the workflow visualization, which I just mentioned around here. And so generally, I think there's a lot more on sort of the observability management. I think it's also interesting here about the certificate management and rotation. It's one thing that we always have to be attentive to, that, there's a certificate management need around these things. And I think this kind of all points really to sort of visualization and operational procedures that really would help you how you manage Dapr in production. That's really what the message I take from this.
Exactly. Yeah, and that ties actually pretty well to one of our tools, right? So one of our tools is Conductor, that you can use to run Dapr in production. And so if you go to diagram.io/conductor, you can actually launch a read-only version of Conductor without any signing up, and that will lead you to this. I'm not going to do the whole run through. Let me get this out, but this gives you like a good view of what's possible within Conductor, right? So there's advisories within Conductor, right? So it gives you advice of your security configuration with Dapr. It gives advice about your reliability configuration, how performant your cluster is, observability as well, and you can like drill down into all these individual advisories, and some of them you can even Conductor can actually even apply the suggested advisory for you to actually fix some issues in your system. Another important thing with where customers usually ask for is, can you have some kind of visualization of my distributed system? And that's available under the apps graph. So here we can see all of the different services and how they are connected, and if they are connected via pub/sub messaging or via synchronously via request response. So that's it's useful to see. Of course, you can also inspect the health. You can also isolate on a certain service and see how everything is connected. So you can get a lot of insights using Conductor. Also, what kind of components is my system using? What kind of state stores? What kind of bindings are going on? What kind of pub/sub messaging systems are connected to?
Yeah, and I think this answers a question that Brian just posted. He says, is there any rapid way to visualize other than the Dapr dashboard and exposure of the different components and the applications and sort of auto-generated web BI? Well, here it is. I think this actually looks at all of the Dapr metrics, and we sort of build this dynamically on the fly. And Conductor has a totally free version of it. You can sign up, and this allows you to point this at your Kubernetes cluster. Just to be clear, this is sort of Kubernetes centric, that you put this thing on here, and then you can do that visualization around these things. This is sort of one way to achieve that in terms of, you can even do this with local development. If you're building it locally, you put a Kind cluster on your machine, you just deploy into that Kind cluster, and then you sort of get this visualization around this. So that, I think, is kind of hopefully answers your question, Brian, in terms of one place you can get the visualization.
Yeah, there's definitely a big step up compared to the Dapr dashboard. Definitely.
Yeah.
So we mentioned this, and finally, when it comes to like Dapr support, how valuable would it be? Well, 96% of people who responded see value in Dapr Enterprise support.
Yeah, this is where we at Diagrid also provide Dapr Enterprise support for you, in that you can come along and we do provide a whole set of services, including sort of the Conductor tool, but effectively, we can also deal with upstream fixes, architectural guidance, the ability to solve hotfix issues, fast response times around these, and make sure that you are fully running and supported inside production. And I think inside here, interestingly, architectural reviews and guidance is something that we can really dive into and save you hours and hours and days of time around this sort of thing.
Yeah, because if we've seen so many installations now that we're in a good position to advise it about the need. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, so if you want more information about the support, this Dapr.io, Dapr Open Source Enterprise Support. And we finish with another quote. The ability to use its components, integration with external services or managed services is super easy, efficient. Dapr is highly performant in Kubernetes environment, and we have tested it. Yeah.
Great quote. Yes, I mean this points back to the ease of use of building Dapr on top of this Kubernetes. That whole component model, the platform engineering, kind of the play around that in terms of rise of platform engineering, and I think that, and just the ease of use of building against these things. And I think that we see this all the time from users of Dapr when they get it deployed into production.
Yeah.
Was that our last slide? Oh yeah.
This is the last one. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we'll be at KubeCon next week in London, and after KubeCon we'll also be at QCon actually. So if you're in the area during KubeCon or QCon, definitely come by our booth. We both are at the Direct booth at KubeCon. There's also a project kiosk at the project pavilion at KubeCon. So please come over and say hi. If you're not around then, please join the Dapr Discord if you have any more questions or your questions didn't got answered. All of the Dapr maintainers and many of the contributors are on this Discord. So this is a great place to get your questions answered.
I'd also post that the survey that we went through today in terms of the Dapr feedback and this State of Dapr report. Hopefully we've posted a link. You can download that, and please download it, and you can see sort of the raw results inside there that we walked through today. And feel free to share that. We're about time, Mark, but look, there's a few questions here that I just see that are in the window here. We could sort of just pick up and sort of run through fairly quickly. And let's see if we can pick these up in the last minute.
Sure.
And if there's any other questions, feel free to just post them. Brian asks, has there been any talk around a repository of reference implementations from microservices that are Dapr compatible and drop-in? And well, my answer to that is we do have a samples repo that had some great places where people dropped in different examples of where they used. If you go to Dapr/samples, it's kind of a public repo where you can sort of drop in different examples of how Dapr gets used across a number of different types of APIs and solutions inside there. I'd have to kind of go back and pull up some particular examples, but there are some things inside you can find there. They're not all maintained because some of them were put in at different times, and so it was up to individual maintainer, but they kind of do give a good indication of how to use Dapr in different sort of architectures. It's always hard to kind of maintain some of these, and I think that's kind of the nearest we have today. But there probably could be a bit of work where we sort of pull together common or kind of recent architecture blog posts that maybe cover some of these things.
Yeah, I think that the challenge is there from sometimes there's one dedicated programming language, but it's not available for any other languages. So it's a bit of sort of incidental that some of these things are there, but it's not like it's one coherent thing that can be applied for all languages, for instance.
Yes.
But if you want to help to contribute to that would be amazing. Yeah.
Yes. And then Brian also asks, the Dapr agents. Yeah, there are examples of how it can be deployed into Kubernetes because there are examples of local, and the answer is, yep, that's coming. We'll be putting that in there. We just did the local development for that first, but pretty much when you develop with Dapr, locally, deploy it into a Kubernetes cluster is that you do a Helm chart installation, or if you want to do the Dapr init-k, that sets up the Dapr control plane inside there, and then you just need to be able to do the step of packaging it up into a container deployment and then doing a Kubernetes deployment with the annotations to run it all. So it's the same mechanism as anything else you do with any of the other Dapr APIs, but we'll get those in there. Yes.
Yeah, that's also on the list for Dapr University, right? So how do you run Dapr in production? So that also involves like creating the images and what kind of steps are involved there. And because it's a well-known sort of gap. It's easy to do at the local development, but then it's quite a step up to run it on Kubernetes. So that will also be tackled with a new Dapr University lesson in a couple of months. Yeah.
All right, I think that's it, Mark. We're at time.
Yes.
Wow.
Thanks everyone for attending.
Yeah, thank you. And as always, please reach out on Dapr Discord. Reach out on to the Dapr website if you want to ask any questions. We've got a contact us there form if you're interested in conductor or enterprise support. We'd love to hear from you around those things. And of course, come and meet us in London at any time. We'd love to hear from you. And if you ever want a story that you want to tell on the Dapr community calls, they happen every 2 weeks. Reach out to one of the community managers, of which Mark is one of them. And we'd love to hear your story. The community is everything to us. And we're so pleased to kind of share these results with the rest of the community that we get from you. It's fantastic to see all of this. So thank you for all of the contributions that you've done to the Dapr project.
Definitely. All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Bye.